In the summer of 1374, beneath a pale and unforgiving sun, the city of Strasbourg moved as it always had. Merchants shouted over one another in the market square. Blacksmiths hammered iron into shape. Children ran between carts carrying bread and grain. And then, without warning, a man stepped into the open street and began to dance. There was no music to guide him, no celebration to justify his movement. His feet struck the cobblestones with awkward urgency, his arms twitching as though pulled by invisible strings. At first, people laughed. Some assumed he was drunk. Others believed it was a crude attempt at spectacle. But he did not stop. Hours passed. Sweat soaked through his linen shirt. His breathing grew ragged, yet his legs continued their relentless rhythm. The laughter faded. Curiosity turned to discomfort. By nightfall, he was still dancing. Neighbors tried to restrain him, but his body resisted with desperate force. His eyes were unfocused, distant, as if whatever controlled his limbs did not require his consent. The next morning, he was still there, shoes torn, feet bleeding, muscles trembling, and still he danced. What began as confusion slowly curdled into fear, for this was no performance, it was no celebration. It was something else, something the city did not yet understand.
At first, the townspeople believed the madness would exhaust itself. No man could dance forever. The body would fail. The muscles would surrender. But Strasbourg underestimated what it was witnessing. Within days, another woman stepped forward and began to move in the same frantic rhythm. Her face showed neither joy nor intention, only strain. Then a third followed. Then a fourth. By the end of the week, dozens were dancing. The sound of leather shoes striking stone echoed through the streets from dawn until deep into the night. There was no music, yet their movements aligned in a strange, fevered harmony. Some cried while they danced. Others screamed prayers between gasps for breath. Still, they did not stop. Families tried to drag loved ones away, but the dancers resisted as if seized by an invisible force. Muscles cramped, feet split open, blood marked the cobblestones in thin, dark stains. And yet, the rhythm continued. The city's physicians were summoned. They observed trembling limbs, rapid pulse, wild eyes. Their conclusion was both simple and terrifying. The blood was overheated. If heat caused the frenzy, they reasoned, then more dancing might release it. So musicians were brought into the square. Drums began to beat, and what had started as a mystery began to resemble a nightmare.
By the second week, Strasbourg no longer resembled a city of trade and order. It had become a stage of exhaustion and dread. Nearly 100 people now filled the streets, their bodies jerking in relentless motion. Some clutched their chests as their hearts pounded violently beneath thin linen. Others foamed at the mouth, eyes rolled back toward a sky that offered no mercy. The air was thick with heat, sweat, and fear. City officials gathered in hurried meetings, their voices sharp with uncertainty. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Church bells rang not for celebration, but for prayer. Priests walked among the dancers, holding crucifixes high, whispering desperate blessings that dissolved into the chaos. Nothing worked. The musicians continued to play, believing rhythm would purge the sickness. Instead, it fed it. The drums echoed like war signals, urging tired limbs to keep moving long after flesh had begun to fail. Families wept openly in the streets. Mothers watched daughters spin until they collapsed. Husbands held wives who trembled violently, only to feel them tear away and return to the dance. No one understood how to stop it. Some whispered that it was divine punishment. Others claimed the devil had entered the city through unseen cracks. But as the sun set over Strasbourg once more, one truth became impossible to ignore.
This was no ordinary illness. It was something consuming the city itself.
By the third week, the dancing was no longer a spectacle. It was a slow execution. Bodies that had once moved with frantic energy now trembled under unbearable strain. Legs buckled without warning. Hearts, driven far beyond their limits, began to fail. Some dancers collapsed mid-step, striking the stones with a sound that silenced even the drums. They did not rise again. Witnesses spoke of faces frozen in expressions of terror rather than pain, as if the horror lay not in the body's collapse, but in the awareness that it would not stop until it did. Still, others continued. Feet were wrapped in cloth to hide torn flesh. Blood darkened the square. The smell of sweat mixed with something heavier, something final. City leaders, desperate and humiliated, ordered the dancers removed from the main streets. They were transported to a nearby shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus, believed by many to hold the power to cure strange afflictions of movement. There, prayers replaced drums. Gradually, after weeks of relentless motion, the frenzy began to fade. Whether through exhaustion, intervention, or sheer survival, the bodies finally stilled. When silence returned to Strasbourg, it felt unnatural. Too many had fallen. Too many questions remained. No plague mark scarred the skin. No wound explained the dead. Only memory, and the unsettling truth that something unseen had once seized the city and made it dance to death. When the dancing finally ended, Strasbourg attempted to return to normal. Markets reopened, church bells rang for ordinary reasons once more. Life resumed its familiar rhythm. But something had changed. The records remained. Chroniclers documented the strange summer of 1374, how men and women had danced for days without rest, how some had fallen lifeless in the streets, and how no clear illness had marked their bodies. Centuries later, historians and scientists would search for explanations. Some proposed ergot poisoning, a toxic mold that grows on damp rye and can cause convulsions and hallucinations. Others argued for mass psychogenic illness, a collective hysteria born from extreme stress, famine, and fear in a fragile medieval world still haunted by the Black Death. They were theories of religious mania, of social pressure, of minds breaking under invisible weight. Yet none of them fully explained the endurance, the scale, the way it spread from one body to another, as if carried by something unseen. What happened in Strasbourg was real. It was recorded. It was witnessed. And still, it resists certainty. Perhaps the most unsettling truth is not that people danced until they died. It is that under the right pressure, the human mind can become its own contagion. And history has shown us, more than once, that fear moves faster than reason.